Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video, I'll be taking a look at my transfer plans ahead of FPL Gameweek 3. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Today, we're going to have a look at transfer plans ahead of Gameweek 3 and a quick reflection on how the season has gone so far after 2 game weeks. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime though, let's take a quick look at the first 2 game weeks. I'm ranked 5.3 million so far, not off to a hot start, and a lot of much better managers than myself are also struggling. If you're out there and you're not having a good time with FPL so far, what I would say is I'm going to advocate for patience quite a lot in this video. I think generally speaking, 2 weeks of data is not a large enough sample size to be ripping apart your side, unless, of course, you've got loads of injuries. Obviously, we have been hit by quite a lot of injuries in game weeks 1 and 2. So if your side is looking a bit shaky with injury doubts and you've got a number of players that are also disappointing, I do completely understand it. But the approach in FPL that tends to work best is one of patience and trying to gather as much information as possible. And I don't think we've seen enough yet that we can confidently start ripping apart our sides ahead of Game Week 3, or at least I haven't. If you have, that is absolutely fair enough. Now, looking at my side ahead of Game Week 3, this is a big reason why I'm trying to be patient, because I'm actually really happy with it on paper. Looking at it, if you remove the flag from Palmer, I think this is a comfortable role for me if I didn't have any issues whatsoever, and if I had not paid any attention to the first 2 game weeks. If I was mapping out the first few weeks, this week at the start of the season, looking at the team that I built, would have been one that I would have picked out as one I'd want to roll in. However, situations do change, and we've got flagged players. We've got players that just have been underperforming as well. So we'll go into a few of those and transfer plans around them in the video. I haven't thought about my captaincy just yet, but Bruno is going to be a little bit tempting at home to Burnley. If Palmer's fit, he would be tempting, and Salah is never a bad option either. So I think I'm relatively well covered there. But tomorrow's video will be looking at my favourite captaincy picks ahead of Game Week 3. Now, obviously, I need to talk about the Palmer issue of it all. He's got a test on Tuesday, so I'm recording this Tuesday morning. So we might have more information come the end of the week, but Maresca is perfectly within his right and could easily keep very tight-lipped on the Palmer injury situation. So we might not have all the information we need come Game Week 3. It is worth noting that they are the early kickoff, just after the deadline for Game Week 3. They kick off 12:30 on Saturday. So we might get some early team news there, but Chelsea aren't the most leaky of sides when it comes to early team news, so we might not get anything. A quick look over at what my team would be if the deadline was 5 minutes from now. Goalkeeper and defenders, I'm perfectly happy with. Murillo has been the most frustrating of those 4, considering no clean sheet so far, and not even close to DEFCON either. But again, small sample sizes, I've still got faith in him, and they've got 3 very clean sheetable fixtures in the next 4 game weeks as well. West Ham and 2 promoted sides in there. So he's going nowhere for now. Tarkowski has been a defensive contributions monster so far, 2 from 2 for him. And Porro has been very good on the attacking threat, as well as operating in a defense that has been very solid so far. So perfectly happy with all 4 of those, including Sanchez in goal. And all of them have decent enough fixtures, not just for this game week, but also in the medium term as well. Moving into my midfield, that's where issues start to occur. Salah's been a bit frustrating, but inevitable nonetheless, getting late returns in both of the opening 2 game weeks. It is worth noting that having a player that effectively just never gets substituted is a massive advantage. It does give him that potential of getting late returns, but getting 2 90-minute plus returns in the first 2 game weeks is a bit fortunate. I'm a little bit concerned about him generally, and I am monitoring him, because if Liverpool are sharing around the goals a little bit more this season, Salah's goal share might come down a fraction, and 14.5 is a lot of money to be spending on a player that is sharing around the goals a little bit more. For now, though, he is not an issue that I need to deal with. Arsenal's not a great fixture, but after that, Burnley and Everton is absolutely fine. Now, I'll talk about Palmer last because he's got the flag. Bruno, frustrating in Game Week 2, going absolutely nowhere in Game Week 3, could even be my captain. After Game Week 3, I will reassess, because if he blanks again against Burnley and looks deep again, then he is an issue in my side. And at 9 million, I can't really afford to have a player that expensive not getting me any sort of attacking returns. But I'm not selling him ahead of Burnley, and it gives me a potential captaincy option and coverage in what is probably the most targetable fixture ahead of game week 3. Undai and Anderson going nowhere, great fixtures for Nottingham Forest to come, and very close to hitting the defensive contribution threshold in both of the first 2 game weeks, meaning he would have been or could have been 4 points ahead of where he's at right now. So perfectly happy with him. Undai came off a bit early, as did Strand Larsen. I'm keeping an eye on both of them ahead of game week 3, but I think they'll both be okay. Pereira played down Strand Larsen's knock a little bit at the end of the game, and Undai took the post-match press conference with Grealish. And usually when you're injured, you don't tend to do that sort of thing. So I think both of them are fine. Then I come on to Ollie Watkins and Palmer, who are probably the least secure in my side ahead of game week 3. With Palmer in mind, it is important to note that he could be absolutely fine for game week 3. And if he is, Fulham at home is a fine fixture, and he's got good fixtures to come after that. If we get confirmation that he's out for 1 game week, but back in game week 4, I might be a little bit tempted to just roll the transfer anyway, and Anderson can come off my bench away at Chelsea. Now, that's not a great fixture for Anderson, but as I mentioned at the start of the season, those players who are very good on the defensive contribution thresholds, like Anderson, can come in times of crisis where you've got a 1-week injury that you just don't want to make a transfer for because you still want the player longer term. And even against the strongest opposition, they could still hit a 3 or 4 pointer, and it makes a transfer less profitable for you. Now, I'm not saying that the player I bring in for Palmer couldn't outscore 4 points, because they absolutely could. But then it's a transfer that I don't have in a later game week. So it might mean that I need to take a hit down the line where otherwise I could have used a free transfer because I've got 1 less to play with because I used a transfer this week. Or it might mean that there's another higher upside move later on down the line that I can't make or I would need to take a hit for. I'm trying to treat transfers as precious ahead of the first few game weeks, and therefore giving me more flexibility later on down the line. That being said, Cole Palmer's a massive doubt, so we need to have a look at potential replacements for him in case he is injured longer term, or even if it's shorter term, if I still wanted to make that move. And Ollie Watkins is the other player that is maybe living a bit of a charmed life in my team. I'm very tempted to move him on because there are other strikers that are looking positive and looking interesting to me ahead of game week 3 and beyond. So let's have a look at both of them. And then also towards the end of the video, I'll have a look at a few different combinations where using 2 free transfers might pay dividends. Right then, so taking a look at some Cole Palmer replacements in case he is out for a little while. Cunha first up. I think I'm less likely to move on Cunha because I've already got Bruno Fernandes in my side. But the double up is at least a little bit tempting because Burnley is a good home fixture, and having double the exposure to a Man United attack would potentially pay dividends. What I would say though is longer term, Man United's fixtures don't look that special. So considering I've already got Bruno Fernandes, I probably am not as tempted to be doubling up, because it leaves me with 1 less free transfer to use next week, and also potentially 2 players that I might want to move on sooner rather than later. I think if I was looking at buying a Man United player fresh today and I didn't have Bruno Fernandes, Cunha would actually probably be the one I look at. A little bit cheaper, good goal threat, looks the most involved in the final thirds, I would say, out of all the Man United players in the first 2 game weeks. So I do back him to do really well in game week 3 against Burnley, and then probably not so badly in the following few game weeks as well. The next 2, Semenyo and Reinders. Now, Semenyo would be a pretty big downgrade from Palmer, giving me a bit of flexibility to use that money elsewhere, which is tempting. Also, very good on the XGI per 90 so far. We know that his shot volume historically is very good, and he's also gotten off to a very positive start in terms of taking plenty of shots this season. I think come Sunday evening, he was actually top of the charts in terms of the shot volume that he'd been taking so far this season. I'm not sure if a Newcastle or Liverpool player overtook him, but he'll be very close to the top yet again. Not bad expected points, decent enough fixtures in the longer term, middling in the short term though. And then obviously there is that benefit of using the extra money saved to upgrade elsewhere, probably in my forward line. Reinders is the final option on screen, even more of a downgrade in terms of budget, and it would maybe give me a little bit of a structural issue longer term, because if Palmer comes back, Saka comes back, then it's not easy to get that second premium into the midfield if I don't have a spot that is at least a little bit closer to that price point. However, Reinders is still tempting, still good value for money, getting good minutes. The underlying attacking data isn't spectacular, but I imagine against Brighton away from home, they'll have chances. And City's fixtures don't look too bad in the middle to long term either. And again, the amount of money saved could do wonders for my squad elsewhere. I wouldn't be that far off of being able to afford Haaland for Watkins either. I would need to take a -4 to find a little bit extra money though, so that does make it a little less tempting. Reinders' ownership as well is a factor. He has got 2 price rises, so he is obviously increasing in that ownership as well. And if he hauls against Brighton, which I have a sneaky feeling he has a good chance of doing so, Brighton don't look too sharp defensively. It could be quite a painful one if I don't own him. So he is also on my radar. 2 other players that I'll quickly mention. Kudus at 6.6 million. A little bit wide for my liking, but Spurs fixtures are very, very good. And Spurs generally have looked brilliant in the first 2 game weeks. And then also Harvey Barnes at Newcastle. With the issues that Newcastle do have, Harvey Barnes is likely to get 80 plus minutes on that left-hand side. Gordon is obviously suspended for 3 game weeks. I'm a little bit worried that they've lost quite a few players, especially in game week 2. It looks like Joe Linton, Shah might be a doubt as well with concussion. I think Tonali might be out for a little while too, potentially. There are issues there. Obviously, they don't have Isak to lean on either, so maybe that will impact them. But Barnes is also one that I'm at least considering because they've got good fixtures for the next 3 game weeks. In the meantime, though, I must say that I'm just hoping that Palmer is fit because I don't desperately want to move to any of these players ahead of Palmer. And it does give me a structural issue and one less transfer to deal with come game week 4. And the other thing that I would note is ideally, the player that I would want to be bringing in this week would be someone like Cody Gakpo, maybe to a lesser extent Florian Wirtz, who hasn't been great so far. But Cody Gakpo especially, at that price point, I think looks like very good value for money. The problem is it's not a great hopping on point. Against Arsenal at home, it's not a great time to be buying. Next week, however, against Burnley is a great time to be buying. So if I can just roll this transfer and maybe take out Bruno Fernandes, for instance, instead of Cole Palmer to get to one of these replacements, ideally Cody Gakpo, that could change my structure and my transfer plans considerably. So whilst Gakpo would be on the list of players that I desperately want at the moment, this week probably doesn't feel like the ideal time to do so. So if I need to move Cole Palmer on, he would still be in my thinking just to get ahead of that move, even if the fixture this game week isn't ideal. However, if I look past Cody Gakpo and I did want someone with a bit of a better fixture this week, I think Reinders or Semenyo is probably the way I go. Semenyo seems like the more likely option at time of recording for me. So Ollie Watkins is another player that I'm tempted to move on. No injury concerns for him, so it's less of a desperate move. But he has been disappointing in the first 2 game weeks. Villa have looked like they lack creativity, lacked attacking threat, and Watkins at 9 million is a lot of money to be spending on a striker who just isn't getting that many big chances on goal. I think he took something like 4 or 5 shots in game week 2 though. So there are some green shoots, there are some positives, and the expected points via Solo for the next 5 game weeks are actually ahead of any of the replacements that I'm looking at. He is more expensive than 2 popular replacements that I am eyeing up though. So João Pedro and Chris Wood, I can get to in one move, and both of them have good fixtures as well. Chris Wood is tempting because he has penalties. He's got 3 great fixtures in the next 4 where I do expect him to score pretty decently, and it saves me 1.4 million. João Pedro also saves me 1.4 million, but doesn't have penalties. And I think with João Pedro, it would be more reacting to the amount of owners that I'm trying to fight against without him and trying to shield myself. So there'll be a little bit of tactical play going on there if I went with João Pedro. But if Cole Palmer is out for a little while, João Pedro's minutes probably increase. And we saw it in game week 2. He got 90 minutes. I think if Palmer was on the pitch, Pedro's likelihood of a substitution, as we saw in game week 1, is a little bit higher because he's competing with more other moving parts. So Esteval could have come off the bench for him. Delap might not have started. Maybe João Pedro would have started up top and then would have come off for Delap potentially. So if Cole Palmer is out for a little while, I think it makes João Pedro a very good pickup. Also because, well, hey, he could be on penalties. There's definitely that potential if Palmer is out. It's not impossible that he takes them, considering he took them at Brighton. So I'm keeping an eye on that. And if Palmer's injury is confirmed as a long-term thing, then I might be looking at 2 moves, moving on Palmer and Watkins so I can get to João Pedro. Now, Chris Wood obviously is tempting as well. If Palmer isn't out for a while, then Pedro becomes a little bit less tempting and Chris Wood goes up in my estimations with the next 4 fixtures in mind. The other one that is maybe on the peripheral of my mind is Gyökeres, who looked great against Leeds, but it is worth noting they've got some very tough fixtures to come in the next 4 game weeks. So less tempted there. The expected points for the next 5 game weeks are almost matching that of Ollie Watkins, which, considering the fixtures, I'm a little bit surprised by, but it just goes to show how threatening he did look against Leeds, and it looks like he's going to have penalties as well, which again gives him another added route to points, which makes him an even better player to be owning. I will say I'm not massively tempted by Gyökeres this game week. Probably come game week 7, he's going to be in a lot of teams and I'm going to be looking at buying him in. A bit like in the previous section with Palmer though, there is one player that I'd love to buy that just doesn't have a great fixture this week, and that is Ekitike. I've got a really good feeling about him. If they don't sign Isak come game week 4, I think I'm going to be there on Ekitike. I'm very, very bullish on him as a player. I'm just a little bit nervous that if they sign Isak, his minutes are going to take a bit of a nosedive for one reason or another. Either they start with Isak up top and Ekitike plays off the left and then gets subbed off for Gakpo, or Ekitike plays through the centre for a little bit, gets subbed off early for Isak for the first couple of game weeks before Isak inevitably becomes the starting 9. There are other ways that he might start regularly for Liverpool, but I think the best way is if Isak doesn't sign. So game week 4 is probably the best entry point for him, but he has looked fantastic first 2 game weeks. So ideally, I wouldn't be really looking at replacing Watkins with any of these players. It would be for Ekitike next game week if Isak doesn't sign. So I'm tempted to roll it on this one, and maybe there's a couple of double combinations I can use that might find me a route to one of these strikers for game week 3 instead. Finishing off with another look at my team ahead of game week 3. As I mentioned, if Palmer's fit, I'm very likely to roll the transfer. I'm actually really happy with the setup for game week 3. Hopefully a few of the underperforming players can actually start getting some points and make me feel a little bit less nervous about owning them. But generally speaking, I would take this as a starting 11. Now, Palmer's the biggest doubt. If we get news that he's out for a long period of time, let's say 2 to 3 game weeks minimum, then I would be very tempted to make at least one transfer. Also tempted to make that double switch I discussed to bring in João Pedro as well, alongside whoever I replace Palmer with. If he's doubtful for game week 3 but not confirmed to be out, or if he's fit, then I am tempted to roll, and Anderson coming off my bench if Palmer is out for just 1 game week is also absolutely fine for me, because like I said at the start of the video, he's got a good DEFCON threshold. He could get 3 or 4 points even without getting the clean sheet, and I just get a feeling that using that transfer later on down the line to save me from taking -4 or to attack something with a bit more of an upside as a move could be a better way of playing it. It's not great to be playing Anderson away at Chelsea and then having a 10.5 million player on my bench for 1 week. But if Palmer is going to be fit for game week 4 and just out for 1 game week, or he's just a doubt, then I think just having him in my side and removing the need for extra transfers down the line to get back to him, or just one less transfer from removing him in the first place, is also an advantage that I can take into future game weeks. Now, as always, let me know what you think of my transfer plans in the comments below, and let me know any of your transfer dilemmas as we head towards game week 3. If you did enjoy today's video, I'd really appreciate it if you could leave like and hit subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you tomorrow as we run through the best captaincy options ahead of game week 3.